Joining us now is Timothy C. Parlatore, attorney for Pete Hegseth. Timothy, welcome to the program. Timothy, there are so many accusations being thrown at Pete right now. I want to set the record straight. First and foremost, let's go to this narrative that he mistreats women. What is the truth?
That is a completely false narrative. It is something that that the media has tried to put out there, and they've used some of these false claims to create that. But the reality is that Pete is somebody who I think is going to be a good champion for everybody in the Department of Defense, men and women. And so a lot of these isolated incidents, false incidents from years ago, really don't have any bearing on that. And I'm happy to go through each and every one of these because they're all false.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Go one by one.
So let's start with this, the claim of the sexual assault. That's the most serious claim. This is something that was investigated by the police, and they went through it. And they actually did a really good investigation. I went through the police report, and they started with her statement and then started to get other statements to try and corroborate it. And ultimately, the very last statement that they took was Pete's. He did something I wouldn't normally have a client do. He spoke to them without me there. But in this case, it turned out to his benefit. And so you take her statement, which is pretty damning unto itself, but then you try and compare it to everything else that the other people said. And you know that she's lying because she's sitting there saying, I don't remember anything. I must have been drugged. And yet she leaves the bar at 1:30. She goes upstairs with Pete, and she's back in her hotel room with her husband at 4 a.m. In that very brief period of time, her husband says, no slurred words, steady gait. She wasn't drugged. Okay. Anybody that knows anything about these date rape drugs, there would have been significant signs at that time. So she's lying about that. All of her coworkers are saying in the bar, they saw her flirting with him. The police investigators went to the surveillance cameras and they showed she's the one leading him upstairs. She's the one grabbing him by the arm and smiling and being seductive. Hotel employees also confirmed this. But then you go look at his statement, which is something that makes a lot of sense. But the key to me in reading his statement is at the very end, where he says that after the consensual encounter, they sat down and talked, and she was starting to have regrets. And she said, I didn't go back to my husband's room. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell him I fell asleep on a friend's couch and I'm very sorry. And yet, when you go to the husband's statement, he says that's exactly what she said when she walked in the room. So the husband actually impeaches her credibility on this fake drug thing and supports Pete's credibility by saying this is what they discussed because this is exactly what she did. So it is something that the police were able to very easily look at and say, this was a consensual encounter. There was no sexual assault. They didn't press charges. That case is completely closed, and it's obvious that it was false.
And just how this has continued to grow is remarkable. The other allegations come from the New Yorker and Concerned Veterans for America. Let's go through those.
Yeah, so the New Yorker, what they did was they took an anonymous complaint from years ago that a disgruntled, terminated employee had written this screed to try and get Pete fired from Fox. Fox looked into these claims back then. I represented Pete at the time. And the then trustee of Concerned Veterans for America wrote a letter to Fox debunking it and saying, no, he wasn't fired for these things. No, he wasn't pushed out. Here's the reason why he decided to leave. They had a philosophical difference of opinion on certain things, and he wanted to build his career at Fox. It had nothing to do with any of that stuff. They interviewed, and several of these people have since come on the record with their names, saying that all of these claims about drunken incidents, strip club, all that kind of stuff, all false. People who were there, people who were willing to put their names on it, not anonymous, so-called whistleblowers. And in fact, some of these things, as a criminal defense lawyer, I often say the best lies is where you take a kernel of truth, then you change a few facts to try and make it, fit a narrative. That's what they did here. So, for example, this story about the strip club of Pete, getting drunk and trying to climb up on stage. That happened, but it wasn't Pete. It was somebody else. Pete wasn't there. Pete wasn't at the event. Pete wasn't even in the state at the time. So you have all this collection of statements or of allegations that have all been completely debunked by other people. But the New Yorker doesn't care about that. The New Yorker went and published that without bothering to check and get corroboration, because anonymous sources who are willing to say something damaging to the nominee is something that they can use to try and sink the nomination process.
And so the other allegation comes from Fox that he has some sort of drinking problem. Your reaction to that?
And this again, when the sexual assault allegation failed, they tried something new. Now they tried the CVA thing. That failed. So now it's something new. Now they have a couple of anonymous, Fox employees who claim these things happened. And yet you saw yesterday morning how out on X, a ton of Fox News personalities and employees came out on the record with their names saying, I sat next to Pete for the past 8 years. This never happened. He never smelled of alcohol. And it is just emblematic of the larger problem here, that if you don't have something good to take down this nominee, if you don't have something that's actually solid, you just go with somebody anonymous who's willing to hide behind that anonymity and make these false claims. And I keep asking these journalists, you know what? If you want me to be able to respond to this directly, tell me who the person is so I can tell you exactly what their problems are with credibility. And of course, oh no, we have to protect our sources. We can't allow their credibility to be questioned. Well, then why don't you go talk to any of these other people? The New York Times, reports about these alleged incidents at Fox. And when they asked me about it, I said, that didn't happen. Well, do you have any witnesses? I said, that's your job. You're the media. You want to, put out an article. You have to fact check it. It's easy to ascertain who else was there at the time because it was televised. Call them up. Or just publish your fake article and wait for tomorrow morning on X to see everybody come out and say, I was there, and the New York Times published another fake article.
Yeah, and so is that it? So we're getting through a debunked sexual assault thing that's nonsense, some concerned Veterans for America thing that's debunked, and that he does not have a drinking problem. I mean, this is what we're spending our time on for Secretary of Defense?
Exactly. When you strip all the lies away, what you have is that over a decade ago, a bunch of young combat veterans who came back from the war got together and occasionally drank too much beer. That's not news. That's not a scandal. In fact, that's the main revenue model of the VFW and the American Legion, is alcohol sales in the hall there. And guess what? Every single one of us did it. Okay? When I got out of the Navy, I drank too much. My friends drank too much. But we matured. Pete matured. Pete overcame that. And unfortunately, some of us didn't. And Pete and I both have lost many friends, to suicide that didn't overcome it. But Pete did overcome it. And this is why I look at these allegations of past alcohol abuse. Everybody wants to say that's disqualifying. I say the exact opposite. I say the fact that he went through that experience, the stresses of combat, the experiences of that, the effects of that, and using alcohol to self-medicate and cope with that, and then overcoming it the way that he has, that gives him a greater perspective than any Secretary of Defense we've had in recent history to understand exactly what every single man and woman that's going to be working for him in that department is going through and what they need. And it's going to give him a much better perspective on how to take care of his people instead of just sitting there in his ivory tower like Austin and Madison, all these guys, passing judgment on anybody that isn't perfect.
Yeah, again, I want to just say that attacking Pete for having a prior drinking problem, or not problem, but just a prior drinking pattern that he's overcome when it comes to the military is very rich. DC, I think, is the drunkest city in the country. I think there literally is a study that DC is the drunkest city. In closing here, you've known Pete for a while. He's served admirably. I know he's fighting like crazy, and he's trying to get out of this. Is there any other accusation that hasn't? I mean, this is it. This is the weakest I've ever seen. Why are Senate Republicans taking this crap seriously?
And this is one of the reasons why yesterday and today Pete and I decided to come out, significantly on offense to attack these allegations, because every single one of them has a perfect factual defense. And I think that that's what the senators need to hear, is they need to hear that defense so that they can be comfortable with this nominee, that all of these things are fake, they're in the past, they have nothing to do with the person that they're talking about putting into the Pentagon. And if anything, his experience of not only overcoming that at the time, but also now his experience of overcoming it right here when everybody's trying to attack him and he's able to overcome that, that's going to make him a much stronger leader in the Pentagon. And all he wants is a fair hearing. All he wants is for the senators to listen to him, ask him the tough questions, give him the opportunity to respond, and then make a decision based on a fair hearing of the actual facts instead of fake anonymous claims.
Timothy, thank you for your time. Excellent analysis, very thoughtful. Again, it was very helpful to kind of have that all laid out. Any Republican that doesn't vote for Pete Hegseth will be primaried and will be removed. Timothy, thank you so much.